a living room, an adjoining dining area, a kitchen, 3 bedrooms, 2 of which are double bedrooms with storage, a bath, a driveway for 2 cars, a private backyard space for gardening, playing, barbecuing and lounging in the sun. This was the freehold terraced family house that Naziat Khan and the 4 children called home, right before the murder. It is important to remind viewers and listeners that images of interior of this house have been taken from Rightmove's site in year 2022 and 2024. These images, however, are not representative of Khan Iqbal household, furnishings or even backyard and are being shown to give a sense and structure to the place, nothing more.
Namaste, dzień dobry, assalamu alaikum, ciao, konnichiwa, bonjour, hola, good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Ken at 10. Good morning to you. We broadcast live every day. We're James Alexander Estate Agents. And we broadcast to tell you what's going on locally here in Norbury, the most fantastic community in South London that you must come and be a part of if you're thinking of getting a place that's commutable with a friendly population and a fantastic community. So how are you? I hope you're well.
In November of 2022, just before the scheduled trial of Zafar Iqbal in Crown Court, we contacted Mr. Ken Hume, the 58-year-old pleasant and wise independent estate agent based in South London. He has been buying and letting houses for 37 years and at his company has a 6-member team, the 6th member being Jasper, the company mascot. He regularly gives advice on real estate matters on YouTube, Facebook, and on this website. London SW16, that is Southwest 16, is a postcode that is shared by 3 neighbouring areas, Streatham, Norbury, and Croydon, in London. We wanted to know more about Southwest 16, especially Streatham, as well as whether residential real estate sales and rents are impacted by crime, especially murder, in the area. We asked him to send video replies to emailed questions, which he did, sitting in his office at 1341 London Road, Norbury.
Hi Nor, I'm Ken Hume from James Alexander Estate Agents. I've been selling and letting properties here in Southwest 16 Norbury for over 30 years now. It's my company. I very much love what I do.
Mr. Hume describes the area that the family lived in as on the borders of Norbury and Streatham, and this is slightly further south of London and is sandwiched between Streatham to the north and Croydon to the south.
The area itself is very mixed in terms of both wealth sets, going from very wealthy investors on the one hand that tend to use it as an area to invest in properties to rent out, buy to let. And on the other hand, we have everything from blue collar workers up to white collar professionals and everything in between. Very mixed race area from all nations of the world, which is great. Keeps us on our toes and keeps us interested. We literally must have every nation of the world, many Asian, many Muslim, many Hindu. The community is very, very mixed. And yeah, it's a great place to be and work. We're a Zone 3 area, and that means that it's commutable to London within about 20 minutes to London Bridge. And that's why people largely come here to settle, because it's a reasonable time to be able to get into the city of a morning. Now, of course, the further out you go from London, the cheaper the accommodation can sometimes be. But of course, then you have to add that time onto your working day. And most people don't want to do that. So demographically, the average Streatham and Norbury resident ranges from blue collar mechanic right the way through to multi-millionaire investor and everything in between. I would say largely we lean towards the lower end, blue collar, middle class professionals rather than the upper end, where you tend to find professionals go towards the areas that have a tube station, because the difference between tubes and trains is that a train will come along about every 20 minutes to take you into the city, whereas a tube will be there every 3 minutes. And obviously this is such a luxury that people tend to gravitate towards areas which have a tube, and those areas will come at a premium when it comes to property prices, both for buying and for renting.
The Rightmove website quotes HM Land Registry data on this house on Windermere Road. It was bought once in February 1997 for £73,000 and then in June 2000 for £113,000 before the murder. We cannot comment on the ownership or residency details of Naziat Khan and the kids, since we do not know who owned the house or whether Naziat Khan was simply living over there as a tenant paying rent. But it is confirmed that Zafar Iqbal was living elsewhere, since the couple was separated and she had filed various legal complaints against him. Now at 44 square meters floor area, that is 474 square foot total internal area, this house is smaller in size than neighboring houses, but costlier in price per square meter, almost double at £679 per square meter, that is £565 per square foot, as per data given on Housemetric site. Murder has done little to dampen the interest in location and residence. Soon after the murder, the property sold for £150,000. Currently, this same house is worth more than £300,000, while nearby ones are priced for sale at £500,000 to £600,000 range. According to data given on Rightmove site, in 2023-2024, terraced properties sold for an average of £675,000 and semi-detached properties sold for an average price of £580,000, making this part of Southwest 16 a popular and in-demand place to be in. Mr. Hume says, quote, "House prices in the past 20 years have risen at least tenfold and average £550,000 for at least 3-bedroom terraced house, on an average street up to £3 million for top roads in Streatham, Brixton borders, and more still in Clapham and so on as you get closer to London, with Chelsea and Mayfair being popular with rich and famous." Unquote. Speaking about the properties in the area, Mr. Hume says,
property prices in and around Windermere area have rocketed over the last 20 years. The main reason is supply and demand. We always seem to have an undersupply of housing for people that want to move to the area, both for rental and for sale. Particularly on rental at the moment, the pressure is huge. There just aren't enough properties out there for tenants, and the rents are rocketing for that reason. But in terms of house price over the last 20 years, they have literally rocketed, and many people look back now and wish they'd kept hold of the properties that they've now sold on to buy another one and rented them out rather than sold them on. And certainly the buy-to-let market in London is busy still, although there have been some tax disincentives which have taken some of the investors away from the sector, including the lack of being able to offset one's interest payments against tax under Section 24 unless you buy with a limited company, or what we call a special purpose vehicle.
Mr. Hume explains the postcode SW16 as follows. Quote, "The meaning of the letters and numbers is our postcode, which is our postal geolocation system. This denotes an area to within a few houses. The postcode system also has prestige attached as far as house prices go. In general terms, the more prestigious postcodes are closer to Mayfair, SW16 being the most prestigious. And then as we come out, so the values drop usually according to the proximity to a tube or transport system, tube being preferable as they run every 3 minutes. Trains average every 20 minutes in most cases. Obviously, great schools and prestigious suburbs also create a greater value addition, especially in areas where there are grammar schools, that is, those of high quality but no fees, or high-ranking private schools." Unquote. Freehold terrace. Now, what does freehold mean? Owning a freehold or being a freeholder means owning both the property and the land on which it is built, and even some airspace above it, as per the way that it is defined on Mansion Global site. Terraced houses are rows of identical-looking houses on street that share sidewalls with no space between the houses. A terraced house is an iconic part of the country's history, architecture, and landscape. Local facilities are at or near the doorstep. It also has the standard boiler and radiator, mains gas, for central heating. There are challenges and issues of selling or renting out a property where a crime has occurred or been committed. And he notes,
the impact and challenges of renting or selling a place that has had a serious crime committed. Well, this is an interesting one. What the law says is, particularly when it comes to selling, that you should disclose anything to a potential buyer that could reasonably be expected to have an impact on their decision to buy it. So something like a murder, if it was committed in the recent past, then you would be expected to disclose that to any buyer. Whereas time goes on, not so much. And then it's discretionary really as time goes by. So for instance, if there were a crime committed in a property, but it was 20 years ago, I don't think it's necessarily the case that people would mind that unless it was a particularly bloody Nightmare on Elm Street type disaster. We tend to find that, the question has to be, start from the position of, would I reasonably want to know this if I were buying this house? And if the answer is yes, then you should disclose that to a buyer, and that is set in law.
He lays out the advice that James Alexander Estate Agency gives for selling property where a crime has occurred.
The expertise for James Alexander, as far as this is concerned, is, well, we've been here for over 30 years. So as you can imagine, there aren't many scenarios we haven't been involved in when it comes to selling properties. So we do assist with this kind of thing regularly. And the key thing is to be sensitive about it. We had one recently where there was a person that had committed a serious crime and was incarcerated, who lived next door to a property that we were selling. And we ended up selling it to a neighbour. And the reason we wanted to sell it to a neighbour particularly, even though it was a slightly discounted price because of that, was purely that we knew if the property were advertised on the open market, it would appear in the national press and everybody would say, this is the murderer's home, and it would be a nightmare then to sell on because it would be blighted by it. But because it was a neighbour and they knew the circumstances, we didn't have to advertise it in the broader sense through the usual portals such as Rightmove and Zoopla, the big ones here in the UK where we advertise UK property. It meant that we could sell it without any such attention being drawn. And that can be an important thing as well, obviously, when you've got a significant event like this, is that actually, not that you want to sweep it under the carpet, but you don't want it sensationalized by the media either.
Elaborating further, he says, quote, and so this means we would need to inform prospective buyers, and it can have a very real price impact, as much as 20%. In real terms, it can mean £100,000 today. He also says, the impact of crime on a house or flat depends upon the type and style of crime. When it involves family only, some people will be spooked by this, but most will not. If a person died in the premises, this can put buyers off, but not all. If there was a violent burglary, this will have a major impact, particularly house invasion and rape. We would look at individual circumstances and may advise a different method of sale, such as off-market, where we advertise without it going online, or auction, which can also work well. He follows it up by insisting that time does heal, however, and in time, these matters tend to fall away as less significant as people forget what happened. Unquote.
The procedure for selling a house where a husband or wife is in custody is usually that person would give a power of attorney, that is the right to sell their asset on their behalf and make financial decisions for them. And that power of attorney would then allow them to dispose of the asset. And we have this happen quite often with elderly people that choose to elect their younger siblings to look after their financial affairs, perhaps when they go into a nursing home or the like, or perhaps because they just don't want the stress of selling it. So it's quite a simple and smooth procedure to actually pass those rights on to a third party, and that's done by a solicitor. And that solicitor will make sure that the person that is being conveyed those rights is conveying those rights to the family member or other person, has all of their faculties with them. And the solicitor will ask questions such as, what day of the week is it? Who's the Prime Minister? Make sure they're with it and alive and know exactly what they're doing. Because, of course, if they weren't able to answer those questions, they could be being defrauded over their largest asset. So the solicitor has to look at a duty of care over that situation. But providing those steps are taken and they jump through the other hoops of anti-money laundering process, which is a big problem here in London, where drug cartels try and use property to smuggle money through in assets such as property investments. And therefore, we need to do thorough checks on them to make sure we know who they are, where they're coming from, particularly when it comes to buyers, but sellers as well. And we know where the money came from. So if a buyer comes along and says we've got £500,000, we have to ask them where that money came from. And we have to be able to see an audit trail and, if necessary, proof of why and how they have obtained that money in order to protect ourselves from prosecution by the Inland Revenue, or HMRC, in fact. I hope that's helpful, Noor. And if you need anything else, give me a shout. Many thanks. Take care.
We leave you with the sound of the music as it plays in the backdrop of the house on Windermere Road that Naziat Khan and the children called home. In the next episode, we'll look into Operation Speldhurst, so named by Met Police to investigate the murder and apprehend ZafarIqbal, as well as ZafarIqbal's life in Pakistan, for decades on the run following the murder.